Can you guys address adrenal fatigue, low cortisol, and the best way to combat that?
Al, you want to go at
Adrenal
it? Got it?
fatigue. It's more like the adrenals don't actually get tired. It's more of a term that is kind of a blanket description of all the body's processes kind of like shutting down. So it's a way of describing HPTA axis dysfunction, and this can happen quite often in fitness competitors and people who are training a lot, especially when they're training CrossFit style or higher intensity and they don't want to feed it. Because we find a lot of people want to train like an athlete and they want to look like an athlete, but they don't want to eat like an athlete. And this is obviously very prominent in women, but I have this conversation with men all the time. I have not had one client come to me who's eating enough to fuel and support the type of activity that they're actually outputting. And that's when the body says, well, F you, I'm going to kind of down regulate everything that's not necessary, which is your erections, your testosterone, a lot of the sex hormones. And then it's going to constantly tell the adrenal glands, hey, we got to hang on for dear life here. I need you to chronically kind of output cortisol because we're in stress mode. Oh, and continue to release blood glucose. And this is going to happen all day long. And similar to insulin resistance, your body's like, okay, I'm swimming in this stuff. And it gets tired in the sense of it doesn't want to see it anymore. I compare it to like if you work at Dunkin' Donuts, which it smells delicious when you walk in, but if you work there for a while, you don't smell it anymore. You don't see it anymore. So, there's ways to combat that as far as understanding like the biometrics, like how are your hunger, energy, cravings, libido, how's your sleep? When all of those things start going through the floor, then something needs to change and something isn't right. And usually you can either toggle your metabolism where you can start exercising less, which means instead of 6 days a week, we go to 2 or 3, and you walk a ton. Just like Gil mentioned, walking is probably one of the best forms of activity we can do because it has no impact on hunger hormones. It has no impact on cortisol, whereas excessive cardio will elevate cortisol. And then walk a lot. And then you generally eat less when you're training less. The other toggle would be to train more and eat more. But most people can't handle that if they're already spiraling from not eating enough for the output that they're doing. So it's kind of going back and forth and spending time in each one of those, which can easily be done with people's lifestyles if they have to travel, if they have a busy work day and stuff like that. So I'm sure Gil will be able to expand more on the science behind that. But that's kind of how I can tell people how, all right, this is how we're going to mitigate what you're feeling. And this is how we can get you back to feeling better. And usually that involves eating enough to support their activity, but they might have to put on the brakes a little bit for a while.
I'm going to keep it short because this can get lengthy. So I'm just going to give people a word to Google if they want to research this on their own. I think a lot of people throw around the word adrenal fatigue when they actually feel what is called in layman terms burnout. They've had enough of life and they're at a point where they say, I'm just exhausted all the time. And I can't get out of bed. I'm just exhausted. I sleep well. I can't shake it. And this, they keep saying, well, it must be adrenal fatigue. This is a chronic state of cortisol and other stress hormones. It's a fight or flight. You're ringing the bell all day long because your stress response is now hitting you a million times a day from every angle. We are primitive animals. Okay. Our endocrine system is designed, millions of years ago, and not for today's world where, there are bills, there are kids, there are this, there are that to deal with all the time, constant stress, social media, social stresses, etc. So Google the word allostatic loads, and you're going to understand what this does to your body and how it brings on chronic disease and fatigue. And once you start to manage your stress levels a little bit better, you're going to start blaming or stop blaming your body's organs because they're only doing what you're asking them to do. So start to manage your mind a little better, and your adrenals are going to reward you in return.
Yeah, you could essentially say like low T is testicle fatigue in a sense, but we don't use that word.
Well, the CPT code is E29.1, which stands for testicular hypofunction, which is a fancy word for saying your balls stopped working.
My balls are tired.
Yeah, testicular hypofunction is testicular fatigue. But at the end of the day, there's a reason for it. So allostatic loads, Google that and you'll understand what it is you need to change in your life to not feel burnt out.